You're listening to SM Media, the number one place for exclusive Scottish football content. Hello, folks, and welcome to the debut edition of the SM Media Transfer Show. I am Scott McPike, and it's been a long absence, but I am back on the podcasting front. It's a great pleasure to be back. It's obviously been a long time. It's been pretty whirlwind few months, but we are back. Obviously, this will be the first podcast in what's hoping to be a range of podcasts that we've got coming up over the next few months. Obviously, still a early process, but we will be getting back to a normal level of content in a few weeks. But where else do we start with? Got the summer. Obviously, the summer this year, we should be having a World Cup, but we are not going to have a World Cup until November, which I think is actually playing a part on the transfer front. To be fair, I think there's a lot of clubs who will potentially be holding money back just for the supermarket that arranges kind of around about November now. That I think January will be a busy month because I think a lot of players who stand out in the World Cup. I'm thinking of past years like James Rodriguez coming to mind in 2014, obviously got a big move to Real Madrid. It's going to be an interesting summer, I think. I don't think a lot of clubs kind of all over the world are doing a lot of business. I'm thinking the likes of maybe Real Madrid have obviously signed the youngster from Monaco, whose name is I struggle to pronounce, but Darwin Núñez as well at Liverpool. That's two massive signings, but not really much else going on. Like there's obviously occasional wee things, but Scotland has been busy. Obviously, there's been a lot going on in different clubs. We will start with obviously what's been happening at Celtic. Champions last season, very, very consistent form to win the double under Ange Postecoglou. This season and this summer, I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as busy as it was last summer for Celtic. Obviously, with the complete blitz they had, a new team, practically a whole new team they had, and it's obviously worked out well. Cameron Carter-Vickers is obviously an impressive loan signing. He has joined in a permanent deal from Tottenham, around about £6.5 million. That is done. That's a big relief to Celtic fans who obviously wanted him to stay on after his impressive loan season. But another loanee who will be likely to be joining on a permanent basis is Jota. The deal is close. All reports are suggesting it is basically just a case of agreeing personal terms, which looks to be the kind of, I think, down to maybe Jota taking an extended holiday or something like that. I don't know the full details, but apparently the clubs have agreed all the details. It's going to be I think it's a 4-year deal, and it's about £6.5 million, round about the same price as Carter Vickers. It can rise to higher, and I'm sure Benfica will have a 20% sell-on fee. I think all the details of that will become clear once the deal's done, but I would expect that to be announced just as soon as kind of everything's thrashed out, which I believe it to be kind of is likely to happen. I don't see there being any hiccups with this, but Jota obviously had been a major find for Postecoglou coming in, looking really impressive, looking like he took to Scottish football well. I thought there was some amazing games he had, but I'm thinking particularly kind of big games that the Celtic won. I thought it was magnificent in most of the kind of away games. In that wee period where Celtic were just winning, which I think was the difference between Celtic and Rangers. Like the away games that Celtic were, the Dundee United game comes to mind. It was terrific, that game, the one with the Rogic goal. Like you just look at games like that, the Dundee one where I think he scored a double and Furuhashi scored a double. They're big performances, and obviously Celtic fans took to him really well. He's going to be an exciting player going forward, and obviously you've got that thing of he's still really young. You bring him in a 4-year deal for £6 million. I think your hope is in 2 or 3 years you sell him for 3 times that, 4 times that. That is the way Scottish football clubs should be operating. They should be bringing players in and hopefully selling them for massive profits down the line. Another deal that Celtic are likely to go ahead with is the signing of the former Dundee United goalkeeper Benjamin Siegrist. All reports are suggesting that deal is close. Siegrist is understood to be in Glasgow today, thrashing out personal terms, so I expect that one to be a goer. I think that's a massive upgrade on last season in terms of backups. I think he will be a comfortable number 2 backup to Joe Hart, but again, it's not like Siegrist couldn't go in and try and claim the number 1 spot as his own. Joe Hart's going to be difficult to replace after his good first season last year. That one could be a good signing for Celtic. I think that one's exactly what they're needing. I think obviously the Barkas and Bain, even Connor Hazard, as unlucky as he's been as well, Siegrist is an upgrade on them. I think there's no doubt about that. I think Siegrist is a really talented fine for Dundee United. Obviously, Dundee United last season, he was really, really impressive. He's obviously had some really good games. I'm thinking that Rangers game as well, where Dundee United held out for a point against Rangers at Tannadice. He was brilliant in that game, saved Dundee United from maybe 4 or 5 kind of excellent saves that, I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if Rangers had maybe have tried to go down that route to kind of bring him in, but he does look the part. He does look a comfortable, kind of impressive goalkeeper. So I think he will be kind of done in the next couple of weeks as well. On to the departure front, obviously we've seen Vasilas Barkas, who went on loan to Utrecht with an option to buy. That was always coming. I think he just didn't look convincing to me. Obviously for the heavy price fee, a lot was expected, and he just never ever got going. The big one, obviously, last night, the famed transfer guru Fabrizio Romano sent Celtic fans into a bit of a tailspin with the news that Josip Juranovic could be subject to transfer interest from the Premier League, and is he likely to leave the club? Now, there's been some conflicting reports on this, obviously. Fabrizio Romano, obviously, his track record's unbelievable. He knows his stuff. He's the man, the go-to guy for transfer news. So when he puts something like that out, you have to just realise that there's something in it. Reports this morning coming out of Croatia suggest that that isn't the case, that Juranovic is happy to stay on at Celtic. With the World Cup coming up, he wants to keep a definite place in a first team, and I think he's obviously going to get that. He had a good season last year, his first season at Celtic. He is obviously looking ahead to that World Cup. I think obviously if you go to a Premier League team, and obviously it depends what Premier League teams are interested in, and there's not many sticking out that in terms that need a right back. I was kind of looking this morning just to see where he would go, and nothing really was standing out. There's not been any concrete interest. I know there was some talk that there was chat about potentially going to Italy, I think, but nothing came of that. So it's going to be an interesting one to follow. I think it will be like a case of there could be offers coming in, there could be inquiries. I think you'll see a lot of reports that what he will be subject to interest, but obviously it's in Celtic's hands. Celtic do not need to sell. Celtic have got a bit of security with the Champions League money they earned this season. They have obviously 5 or 6 prize assets that if they wanted to sell, I imagine they would generate a great deal of profit for them. But I don't expect Celtic to sell anybody this summer. I really don't. I think there'll be, unless something crazy comes in for like a Kyogo or even like I'm trying to think like a McGregor or something like that. I do not see them selling anybody this summer. I think they're pretty secure. I didn't think I would be saying that 12 months ago, that Celtic would be obviously winning a league and just come in and just completely brought a feel-good factor back to Celtic. It was obviously missing the season before, and obviously we've done one of the few projects I did in my time off was the Ange effect, where we looked at the kind of whole season in detail, and one of the things that stood out to me is just how much Postecoglou brought a kind of feel-good factor back, that the fans just who were really, really sceptical about the appointment, and it wasn't Eddie Howe and things like that. Now 12 months later, I think Celtic fans are delighted with how it's turned out. So it's going to be an interesting summer. Obviously, Jota, I think, is the big one, bring him in and keeping Juranovic, which obviously it just depends how there must be something in it if Romano is printing it out, because he knows his stuff. But that's one to just keep an eye on. So where does Celtic need to strengthen? That was one of the questions that was sent in. I think they could be doing with obviously, if Seagrass comes in, I think that solves the backup goalkeeper problem. I think they're sorted in most places. I think that the one thing that sticks out is maybe a left back. I know Greg Taylor has improved kind of year on year, but I still think there's potential for better. I think obviously I don't think there's much competition for Greg Taylor, which is kind of a big thing. Ball and goalie, I think, is done. I can see him being one of the players that disappears in the summer. There's talk of a left back coming in. Is it Giaz, I think his name was? I would need to kind of further research that. But there was talk of left back. I think that could be a position where Celtic strengthening in the summer. Rogic is obviously going to be tough to replace, but I think O'Reilly kind of come in and kind of made that spot his own. I think he will be one that will take advantage of that in the summer. I think once you get a pre-season under his belt, I still think you miss that pivot in midfield, because I think if you play McGregor there, you're kind of holding him back going forward, and I think going forward is one of his best assets. I think I'll be holding midfielder. I think Obviously, McCarthy was meant to do that, but I just think McCarthy, I just don't think you can trust McCarthy to be the kind of main man in that midfield, the way like a kind of Brown was and things like that. So I think midfield is just that as one where I think one or two bodies might be enough. I think obviously if you like Hidiguchi, Hakate's there as well. He came in and started really well. Kind of flitted out towards the end, but I still think he's got a lot of upside. Forward position, I think Celtic are fine. I think Giacomakis is going to be a revelation even next season as well. I think he came in and just he got a run together that was, I mean, you're not the top goal scorer in the Eredivisie if you're not a proper finisher, and I think you see that he's just some of his goals were clinical finishing, just what I think Celtic need. I think obviously you've got Kyogo, Jota's probably going to be there, Maeda, Forrest, Abada. You're pretty much, you've got numbers, and you've got quite talented numbers. It's obviously, do you maybe need another one just to free up that if one of them get injured? But I think Celtic are fine in most departments, to be honest. I think just maybe one or two bits of quality just for the Champions League, and I think they'll be fine. But I think it's going to be a relatively quiet summer for Celtic. I don't see a lot of action taking place. Obviously, if there is news and kind of updates that come through, you'll be the first to know. SM Media will be all over it. But I do not think we will see a massive summer for Celtic. We'll move into Rangers. Let's have a look at Rangers so far. Not a busy summer so far, as we kind of thought. I think we were all thinking we would maybe see a bit of a kind of freshen up. I think that's been one of the difficulties for Rangers fans. I think Rangers fans were expecting a wee bit of a blitz. John Souttar's been the only signing so far through the door. Obviously, Cedric Itten has left to go to young boys. The big thing for me this summer is, what do Rangers need? One of the questions we received is, why hasn't there been activity? I think that there maybe has been activity. I think there will be some things happening. I think just because obviously the in-house way it is at Rangers at the moment, I do not think you'll know until you see them with a scarf or you see them being announced by the club. I think it's just going to be one of those summers where the rumour mill will obviously keep going, and that's, you see yesterday, for example, like Alan McGregor, obviously we'll touch on that in a couple of minutes, but it came out from the Rangers Review, who do a terrific job on kind of covering Rangers. I think they're one of the few kind of giant media teams that have access to Rangers, and Rangers do speak to. So when they have something out, it usually tends to be right. So when that news was coming out, it seemed inevitable that Alan McGregor would be signed. But it's not like any other clubs in Scotland where you will hear it from the kind of mainstream media, like your newspapers and things like that, because Rangers do not talk to them. And it's that simple. And I do feel a bit for the club, because obviously fans are excited. This is a summer. Fans want to hear players coming in. Fans want to hear movement on transfer window and things like that. The club are not, obviously, it's not the same as it was 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, where the club would maybe have their sources in the kind of mainstream and they would kind of tell them things. It's not that now. It's very in-house. And again, you feel for the club because kind of rumours start and they're shut down, and you do see a bit of kind of negativity towards the Rangers board about it, which I don't think they can help, but obviously it's just the way things are at the moment. I don't see it changing, so there's no point moaning about it. It's a weird one. Some things that are kind of happening at Ibrox that we're aware of. Obviously, the new contracts have been agreed with the likes of Scott Arfield, Stephen Davis. Connor Goldson signed a 4.5-year extension to his contract. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. I think that was one of those that was just, I think a lot of people had just accepted the fact that Goldson was going to go, and then just out of the blue, it was just one of those things. It was completely, nobody knew he was going to re-sign. So that is what I'm talking about. It's this thing, your only news is from the club, so there's not that kind of wee debate you can have, and not wee kind of chats and the rumour mill and things like that, which I think that's what the transfer window is all about. I think people like it in a wee bit of kind of, let's talk about this guy that's linked with Rangers, this guy that's linked with Celtic. It's a wee bit of a buzz. It gives us all a wee bit of kind of something to talk about over the summer. There's no football happening, so you're obviously talking about like the potential for transfers. Alan McGregor has signed a new contract, a new year extension. It was a weird one. It's not one I expected. I thought it would be like, I didn't expect him to re-sign after the Scottish Cup final, I thought the Scottish Cup final obviously coming on for that last minute, I thought that was a fitting send-off, to be honest. I think obviously Father Time does catch up with you, and I think it maybe has in some degrees for Alan McGregor so far last season. I do not think he was making those mistakes 2 or 3 years ago. I think that, and it's a really difficult one because obviously Alan McGregor, certainly the greatest Rangers goalkeeper I can remember. It's always between Kloss and McGregor because Gorham, I wasn't there for Andy Gorham in the Rangers team, so it's always between Kloss and McGregor. McGregor always edges it for me. So you've got that kind of loyalty to McGregor that he's a club legend, you don't want to be disrespectful. But on the other hand, he is pushing 40. He's just turned 40. He isn't what he was 10 years ago. You can't be. It's Father Time. It's the big thing. It's Father Time does catch up with you. And it's the same in football. And if McGregor's had a change of heart and after that game, I do not think Alan McGregor, I do not think that thing in the Scottish Cup final happens if Alan McGregor's re-signing. So I think there's been a change of mind in some way. Whether it's the player, whether it's McGregor saying I can still go another year, fine. I don't think the issue is giving Alan McGregor a new year contract. I think it's the thing of, I think a lot of people are thinking, I think a new goalkeeper was a target. I think like you've seen the likes of the links for like Jack Butland, and the one that stuck out to me was the goalkeeper, was it Kovacevic, I think from the side in Poland, is it Ruchu? I think there was big things on that from Poland. I think there was certainly something in it, but obviously went cold, whether it's down to McGregor re-signing or just player not wanting, I do not know, but there was something in it. There was definitely something in it because the Polish reports seemed to suggest that Rangers were one of a bunch of clubs interested in I think it's a Bosnian international, Kovacevic. I think it's all went quiet now. I think he's either staying there or he's going to another club. I think Rangers, it's cooled somehow. But you've got Alan McGregor, obviously. Is he going to be the number one? We put out a poll last night and John McLaughlin won that comfortably, that John McLaughlin should be the number one next season. I think if John McLaughlin is going to be the kind of future number one, I think then it's fine to keep McGregor and have him as a valuable backup. I think the thing as well with a lot of people were thinking was, I think McLaughlin was more kind of suited to certain things. And what I mean by that is, I think McGregor was not coming out for crosses. He never ever did, but I don't think he was instilling the same confidence in the defence that I think maybe McLaughlin did when he came in. Like the Celtic Scottish Cup final, I think McLaughlin commanded his box, came out for crosses, and I think that settled the defence as well. Whereas there was maybe 4 or 5 goals last season that were caused by McGregor not coming out for crosses, and that's obviously not. That's McGregor's always been like that. I would say McGregor's a better shot stopper than McLaughlin, but he is pushing 40, so it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one. If McGregor's going to be the number one next season, which I don't think he will be. I think it will either be McLaughlin or another, and McGregor will kind of be a number 3 with more a kind of coaching aspect of it. If that's the case, if it's going to be the case that McGregor's there as the number one and McLaughlin's kind of been patient and things like that, it's just a weird one. It's one of those where you're thinking, is this bold ambitious? Do they want to go forward? And you need to replace McGregor at some point. You can't just keep offering him 1-year deals just to keep him on board. It's not. You need to bite the bullet and make that change. And I have no problem with McGregor staying. I don't think anybody has a problem with McGregor staying. I think it's just what it shows that what's changed in the past month, where McGregor looked as if that was the swan song at the end of the Scottish Cup, and now he's back on board for another season. Is it going to be number one? Is the reins going to be handed over to McLaughlin? Is there going to be another party that comes in over the summer? It's going to be an interesting one, but obviously it was a weird one yesterday, McGregor re-signing. I think a mixed response. I think a lot of people worried about the message it sends, but also a lot of people hesitant because McGregor's a club legend, and he is a club legend. He's one of the 2 greatest goalkeepers Rangers have ever had. So where do you stand on it? It's a weird one, and it's obviously one that we'll look at. I imagine Rangers will be linked with goalkeepers. I imagine there'll be a potential thing. One thing that's not true is the weird things that were going about the other day, that Robin McCrory was linked with a move to Manchester United. That has been categorically denied. That is not true. Some respected sources have said that isn't going to happen. Couple of things, couple of people Rangers are said to be making inquiries about. One of them was Eric Botheim, the former Bodo Glimt striker who moved to FK Krasnodar. There was a report from somebody at the BBC maybe a few days ago to say that Rangers were making inquiries about his availability. Obviously, he was at Russia. Something with the contract obviously went wrong, and now he's a free agent. So he's moved for $7 million in January, and now he's available on a free. So I think Rangers, Celtic, I think there'll be a bunch of clubs obviously willing to make inquiries. The same source a couple of days later, I forget the gentleman's name, he said that there was no truth in it. So he'd started something and then said there was no truth in it. Yesterday, though, some creditable source in Norway had made a comment that Rangers had made an inquiry along with a bunch of other clubs. So obviously you won't find out the truth in this until you see either Eric Botheim with a Rangers shirt on, or you see him with another team shirt on. So err with caution on that. I think that's obviously, I think the potential in this is that you're potentially picking up a really talented player for free that's worth, I would say, easily £7 million. So I think Rangers, that is a market Rangers should be going down. I think Rangers obviously need a striker. I think that was a big thing with the absence of Morelos in that amazing Europa League run. The lack of strikers. I think Rangers do need a striker. Particularly a goal scorer who's in dangerous positions. I think even the Hearts game, the cup final win, was a specific example of that. Rangers had made so many chances, but just didn't have a finisher there. A proper number 9 who could make those big runs into the box and just finish. Like Chris Boyd, for example, I think that's what Rangers are lacking. I think Rangers are lacking maybe 2 or 3 different things, but I think that's one of the main ones. I think they're either back up to Morelos or somebody to kind of push Morelos to start, because yes, you've got Alfredo Morelos, who's a top-class striker, but is he a proper number 9 finisher who's going to get you 30 goals? That's a tough one. That's one that I think Rangers should be looking into the market of maybe a striker in the summer window. Cameron Harper of Aston Villa has been rumoured to be a target for Rangers. Now, I don't know if there's something in that. There's been talk on both sides of the border that from kind of newspapers and things like that, but Rangers are one of a bunch of clubs interested. Again, it's banging an old drum. Until you hear it from the club, I would err with caution. I think there's potential for that to be one that could kind of drag on. I think a lot of players will be linked with Rangers in the summer. Until you hear it from reputable sources, err with caution. One thing that I think Rangers do need to sort out, and I think this is one that hasn't been addressed often enough, is the contract situation that's going on with, in my opinion, 3 prize assets: Ryan Kent, Alfredo Morelos and Joe Aribo. All 3 of them's contracts end in 12 months. And if there's 3 ways of looking at that just now. Are all 3 of them willing to run their contracts down? We have seen a lot of that in the past few years with players that kind of want a higher signing on fee for more wages down the line. So if that's one way that could be happening. A second thing, which would worry me if I was obviously a Rangers fan, with the same thing with Connor Goldson, if you let these contracts run down and 1, 2 or 3 of these players go for nothing, that is serious poor work in the transfer market, because you're easily looking at double figures, easily looking at 8 figures for all of these. If you properly use well and kind of renew contracts, sell at the right value, things like that, you can't let their contracts run down. I think that's just bad business. So that's one of the concerns I have. Even if one of them were to go on a free transfer in the next summer, I think that's bad business. I think you're buying all 3 of those players with the prospect of selling them on down the line. I think that's always why that should be the thing with any club in Scotland. You buy to sell for massive profits down the line, because that is the main way you're going to generate funds. So that's a concern. And the third thing I'm looking at it is it time for this squad to be given a bit of a kind of reality of let's just change it up a bit? A lot of these players have been here under Steven Gerrard, and I think it's time for a bit of a kind of bust and just a bit of freshness brought into that Rangers team. I think that I think I saw something the other day that 10 of the 11 players that started the Europa League final, 10 of the 11 players who started the last Celtic game or something played Gerrard's first game. And that's 4 seasons. And that's a concern. That's where you need to look at freshening the squad up, bringing in a few bodies, because you need that kind of bolt of excitement. And the big thing as well, obviously, as the Champions League. Rangers should be aiming for the Champions League should be the key thing this summer. Get some bodies in, maybe move some bodies on that you want to, if the kind of money thing is the problem, sell a couple of players, bring a couple of players in. I think that's the way they should be going down, because I think Champions League has to be a priority this year. You've seen how impressive Rangers were in Europe. They're more than capable of reaching the Champions League. And I think with the money it generates, it should be a priority. So Rangers, I think there will be a busy summer. I think it will be busy. I think it will be busy in both fronts, in and out. The one that potentially, the thing that worries me is the Rangers board, are they focused on a future of a new manager who's only had one window, and it maybe wasn't the best window? Obviously, the Ramsey thing was a big one, but he's a new manager. You have to give him let him at least kind of chance to bring in his own players, because that's the way football's going. You need to give managers a chance to bring in their own bodies. You're seeing it at Man United this summer. I don't think Erik ten Hag takes that job if he's told you're keeping all those players. So I think Giovanni Van Bronckhorst will be thinking, I want to put my own stamp on the squad. I don't want to be, although he's got to a Europa League final with most of those players who obviously weren't his own players. A bit of freshness isn't a bad thing, as long as you kind of get it right. You need to do a bit of shopping around, a good bit of scouting, and I think there could be a bit of a splash in the summer. I just think it needs to. I think we need to see a bit of movement in the next couple of weeks, because obviously Champions League qualifying so quick. If you leave it late, you're running a risk of what happened last year with Malmo. And obviously that worked out well, Europa League final, things like that, but you need to watch what you're doing in the transfer market, in my opinion. Let's move into the rest of the Premiership. There's a lot been happening. We'll start with third place Hearts, who obviously got a spot in the Europa League playoff round. They're guaranteed some form of European football, whether it's Europa League, if they win the playoff, or they drop down to the Conference League. Alan Forrest was the first signing they've made. I think that's a really good piece of business. Obviously, a player who keeps progressing. Obviously, a really good spell at United. Went to Livingston and kicked on again, and you see how well he's done. He's moved on to Hearts. I think that could be a really good piece of business for Robbie Nielsen's side. A couple of ones to talk about from Hearts. Joyce Grant from Peterborough is understood to be very close. I think there's a couple of things just found out, personal terms and a medical, but I think that one is close to happening if he's been agreed, I understand, with Peterborough. Lawrence Shankland obviously is the one that seems to be kind of generating some noise at Hearts at the moment. The understanding is it's very close that he will be returning to Scotland and going to Hearts. Don't know where they're at with a fee. I don't think personal terms are going to be an issue. I think there is a degree of homesickness there, in my opinion. I think that there was a lot of talk in January that he was wanting out of Belgium. So I can see this being obviously a go-up. Shankland will obviously bring goals. We know his track record at Ayr and then obviously Dundee United, and he's done pretty decent there at Belgium, to be fair, at Beerschot. I think he scored something like 6 goals in 12 games at one point. He's one of those players who's going to score goals, and I think he's going to complement kind of Liam Boyce also. So there could be that could be a good signing. I think there's obviously a few things to be thrashed out with that, but I think that one could be definitely going ahead in the next couple of weeks. Across the Edinburgh City, we will move on to Hibs, who've obviously a lot of transformation this summer. Lee Johnson, who the former Sunderland manager, has been brought in to be the new man at the helm at Easter Road. Weird one. I didn't see that coming. I thought there would be whether the Sean Maloney project was a bit of a one that you don't go for inexperience, you maybe just go for someone who's got a good track record, perhaps down in England, or the Scottish one. That it's a weird one. I didn't see it coming, but Lee Johnson is obviously the man at the helm. Good bit of business so far. He's brought in David Marshall. Matt Macy is going down south. I hear that deal is, I think it's Swindon. I think somebody can tell me if I'm wrong in the comments. But David Marshall, obviously we know his experience, Scotland international, Celtic, QPR, Derby. He's been many different places. He's done really well in his career. Good bit of experience as well. I don't think they'll go wrong. Another experienced Scottish ex-Scottish player who could be heading to Easter Road is Aidan McGeady. That deal was understood to be very close to happening. He obviously played with Lee Johnson at Sunderland, so he knows him well. That seems to make a lot of sense. I think McGeady's obviously at a stage where I don't think he'll do many harm coming up here and kind of finishing his career. Similar, you've seen like Charlie Adam, Chris Burke as well. A lot of players come back home. They come back home to where it all started, and McGeady's obviously wanting to come back to Scotland. He is understood to be close to agreeing a deal. I think there's medicals and things to be agreed, but the deal seems to be close to happening. McGeady could be heading back to Scotland. One of the stories of the transfer window from a comedy perspective is the deal involving the loanee from Hibs, Rocky Bashiri. I don't know if you heard that. It was quite a funny one. Hibs were obviously signed him in January in a loan deal. I don't think he stood out in many games. I don't think there was a lot of sadness that his loan spell was up. But Hibs had sent a thing out on Twitter saying to wish him well in his future, that he wouldn't be signing on with Hibs in the summer, but he had generated enough appearances that the buy-on agreement with his parent club was activated, so he would be heading to Hibs in the summer in a permanent deal. So Rocky Bashiri is a permanent. I think it was Norwich he was at, I think, and Rocky Bashiri is a Hibs player, so I don't think a lot of Hibs fans are jumping up and down at that prospect, but obviously you can still turn it around. But it was a weird one. I think it was a weird one because I think Hibs had already said their goodbyes. I don't think Hibs knew that they'd activated the kind of purchase agreement there. So Rocky Bashiri will be playing for Easter Road next season. Also, they've signed Jair Tavares from Benfica, an exciting young winger. That could be an interesting one. Obviously, we'll see where that goes. He will have, I think Lee Johnson came out and said the Hibs fans will need to be patient. I think that's fair. I think a lot of players coming from the kind of Portuguese market to here, it's a big culture difference. So we'll see where that goes. Aberdeen, it's been more about the outgoings that have been catching people's eye. Calvin Ramsey, the exciting young right back, is now a Liverpool player. He joined in a deal that could total up to £7.5 million. So that is excellent business for Aberdeen. I was a big fan of Calvin Ramsey at Aberdeen. I thought he'd done really well in his first season. Broke into the Scotland under-21 team. Looks an exciting prospect. I think that right back position looks stacked now for Scotland. You've got Patterson, Ramsey and Ralston, who's had a big comeback at Celtic, shall we say. Obviously scored in the Armenia game. Calvin Ramsey is going to Liverpool, and my understanding is he's going to be the backup to Alexander Arnold, so he's going to be in and around the first team. There's two sides of looking at that. Obviously, he's going to be around some of the best players in the world. You've got like Salah, Alexander Arnold. You've got a pretty good. I think there's some pretty good teammates there to ask advice for and things like that. So I think he will get first team football. I think he will play cups and things like that, or whether he goes out on loan. He needs to be playing games though. The worry I would have with that move is, does Calvin Ramsey just sit about for 3 years and wait for his chance, but then he's only played a handful of games and he's 3 years older and he's not had the experience of first team football as much as he would have if he maybe stayed at Aberdeen or went back on loan. The Danny Wilson effect, I call him. Remember, Danny Wilson obviously broke through really well at Rangers, went to Liverpool for 3 seasons, and I think he played something like 7 games in 3 years. And I don't think Wilson ever hit the heights of what people thought of him, particularly at Rangers. So that's the worry I would have about that signing. But a brilliant piece of business for Aberdeen. Obviously, they'll invest that money. Jim Goodwin will get some of it to spend, and by God, does he need it, because Aberdeen do need a serious boost in the summer, or they're going to be in real problems. I think Aberdeen will need to seriously reinvest some of that money, get a whole new team in. I think there's a lot of players there that need to go. I think there's a lot of players that are not good enough for a team like Aberdeen, and obviously Jim Goodwin will need to bring in his own players, similar to the thing we're talking earlier about Rangers. New managers need to bring in their own players. They need to have their own input in the transfer market. So I can see Aberdeen having a really busy summer. Also, potential outgoings at Aberdeen. Connor Barron, another one of the exciting youngsters that was breaking through at Aberdeen. He's been linked with a move to Celtic. I don't know how far along that is, if there's going to be potential movement in that, but I think Celtic have been looking at him. I think Celtic have been scouting him a few times. I think a Belgian club were in for him as well. I think it was Genk. So there's obviously interest there. Aberdeen, I think, will be keen to hold on to him for another year after losing Ramsey, although they made a lot of money in Ramsey. They will want to kind of build a team around Conor Barron. I think he's capable of that. So I would watch that one and see where that goes. Lewis Ferguson is one player I think will be leaving Aberdeen. I think he will be heading to England somewhere. I think Millwall were prepared to pay about £1.5 million to bring him to London. I can see him being sold in the summer. I think he's at a stage now where he's probably ready for a move. I think he could be one of those players that moves on in the summer. What's else been happening around about the Premiership? The United, obviously, the big story is obviously Tam Court's leaving to go to Hungary. Jack Ross has come in. I expect the United to be making some signings in the summer. Kilmarnock obviously back up in the Premiership. They've made a good start to the transfer business. Kerr McInroy, who'd obviously had a really good spell. I think he was at Airdrie and then moved to Ayr on loan from Celtic. He has joined Kilmarnock this summer, so he could be an exciting signing for them. Zach Hemmings obviously re-signed in another season-long loan. Good bit of business for Kilmarnock. I think the fans will be happy with that. We kind of broke that yesterday, that there was potential he was coming back. So yeah, there's a lot been happening in the Premiership. St Johnstone obviously making some signs as well, securing their safety. And the Considines obviously re-signed for them from Aberdeen after a long spell at Aberdeen. We will obviously be keeping you updated with Premiership stuff, so keep an eye on what's happening in the Premiership. Let's move on to the Championship, where there's been some good early signs of business so far. Inverness brought in Stephen Boyd from Alloa on a free transfer. That could be a good bit of business. Obviously, Stephen Boyd done really well last season with 7 goals in 34 games, I think he got. Dundee obviously looking to get straight back up. Not an awful load of business happened so far. I don't think there's any new signings. Zach Rudden, obviously, his deal became permanent. Nothing really happening at Dundee. Gary Boyle's obviously got the job. A few players have left. Obviously, Christy Elliott, Charlie Adams obviously left. I don't know where he'll end up. If he'll pack in football or he'll move into the media. I don't know what will happen there. One team that have made a few good signings so far are Partick Thistle under Ian McCall. Anton Dowd, who I'm a big fan of, obviously from his time at Falkirk and Arbroath and Loan, he has moved to Partick Thistle on a free transfer. Harry Milne, who was, I think he was one of our player of the seasons last season in League One for Cove, has made the move to Firhill. That'll be a good bit of business. Bringing back Stephen Lawless as well from Dunfermline. That will be good. I think that'll be good for all parties there for him to get back to playing at a place he knows well. Harry Muirhead as well, who obviously had a really good season at Ayr. They've done pretty well so far, Partick Thistle. I think there'll be more to come, but I think that could be good for their promotion hopes. I think they've got a good chance of promotion this year. Morton, who have obviously survived relegation, I think Doug Emery done a terrific job there to keep them up, have made a few good signings as well. Brian Schwacke from Livingston, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Sorry, Brian, if it isn't. I know you'll probably watch this show. He obviously had a good season at Edinburgh City last season. He has moved to Morton on a loan from Livingston, so that'll be a good bit of business for them. Queen's Park, a double signing. Morton have signed 2 players from Queen's Park, Jake Tongo and Grant Gillespie. Jordan Baird, obviously, from Ayr as well. So they are hoping to move up the table this season. Obviously, they're hoping not to be involved in relegation. Who else have made some good signings? We have seen the likes of Ayr. Obviously, they've still got a few. There's big plans at Ayr. Obviously, the Graham Matthew been there, Lee Bullen. I think there'll be a lot of movement at Ayr in the summer. I think we'll see a load of interest for a load of players. Wraith have made a few good signings as well. Obviously, Ian Murray has moved from Airdrie to Wraith Rovers. He has taken Dylan Easton with him, who has been one of those players who's just moved up levels every season. 2 seasons ago, he was at Celtic, done really well, got them promotion into the League Two. Moved obviously to Airdrie last season, where he was instrumental in a really impressive season. Won our player of the season for them as well. I think he done really well. Ross Millen, obviously formerly of Kilmarnock, has went to Wraith Rovers as well, and Scott Brown from Peterhead, who obviously has a good track record. Queen's Park obviously up as well. They have made a few good signings so far. Jason Naismith from Kilmarnock has joined the Owen Coyle revolution at Queen's Park. Grant Savoury from Peterhead, another good young Peterhead player, and Dom Thomas from Dunfermline. So there's a lot of action taking place there. League One, Queen of the South, Dunfermline, Falkirk, all making a load of moves. Dunfermline under James McPake, Kyle Benedictus from Wraith is their big signing in the summer so far, so that'll be interesting to see where that goes. Queen of the South have made a few really good signings so far. I'm really impressed with their signings of the likes of Gavin Riley, Michael Ruth, Rico Katongo, Conor Murray, Ian Wilson from Morton. There's a load of good players in that team. I think that was the right decision, absolutely, giving Wally Gibson that job full time. I think they could be in the process of going straight back up as well. Falkirk, who have been kind of down the leagues and things like that, they've had a weird spell the past few years, but they're starting pretty well to try and get back to where they want to be. They obviously want to be up the leagues as possible. They should be in the league. They shouldn't be in League One, in my opinion. The thing here that I worry about Falkirk is, have they spent enough time up there in that league that they've just get used to it? The likes of Gary Oliver, Stephen McGinn. I mean, they're bringing in good players. Cole Donaldson as well, who's at Ross County. They're bringing in good players. So there's definitely some upsides there. So we'll see how that goes for them. League Two, not a lot of movement in leagues. The one team that stood out to me is Stenhousemuir in their business. Stephen Swift has made some big signings there. He's brought in Connor Brennan from East Kilbride, a really good goalkeeper at the Lowland League level. Will Sewell from Largs, who I'm a big fan of. Everybody who listens to our West coverage will know that Will Sewell has been scoring every week for Largs, been instrumental in keeping them up. He is massive for them. He was massive for Largs, keeping them up. So I fully expect him to be moving up the leagues, and I think he is going to do really well at Stenhousemuir. I think he's going to have a brilliant time in his career as well. And he's going into a good team. He's going into a team which has brought in the likes of Craig Bryson, who he can learn from, and I think they'll form quite a good wee partnership there. So I think Stenhousemuir could be one of the teams to keep an eye on this season in that league. East Fife as well, they brought in Alan Troughton, obviously a good bit of experience from Alloa. He could be good and try to get them straight back up to League One. And one of the big signings for me is this Dumbarton signing Ali Love from Clyde. I think that's a great piece of business. I think he was very good for Clyde last season. I think he just missed out on our Team of the Year, but he was really good for Clyde. He will do really well at Dumbarton. I think Stevie Farrell will be desperate to get them back up. So I think there'll be a lot of movement this season from a load of clubs in that division, but keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on that league. There'll be some big moves happening over the course of the season. Let's move into the Scottish Women's Premier League. Not a lot of action to report on so far. Glasgow City have made their deal for Abby Grant permanent from Leicester. Obviously, she spent time at Glasgow City in the past. She moved down south and came back in loan. She has made that deal permanent, so she will be playing at Glasgow City from next season. Celtic, one signing. They have signed Lucy Ashworth-Clifford from Lewis, the young striker. A lot of reports from down south saying she's very impressive. So I think she could be exactly what they're looking for. So player like Charlie Wellens and Jacinta, who have been really good. They've been carrying Celtic the past couple of seasons, I would say. So bringing in Lisa Clifford taking her help with the goals will help a lot. Rangers obviously coming off an unbeaten season, not much happening in the form of transfers. Two players that have moved on from Rangers though are Emma Brownlee and Kiara Grant, who have moved to Hearts and they've become the first semi-professional players to play for Hearts. So yeah, that's a big one for them as well. Two really exciting players. Georgia Timms as well from Lewis, who obviously the Lucy Ashworth-Clifford played for. She has joined Hearts as well, so Hearts obviously getting some business done early. A couple of other ones to mention. Lucy Ronald has joined Motherwell. She is a really good player. I'm a big fan of Lucy Ronald. I think she's a really impressive player. And Poppy Lawson has joined Hibs from Man United. So some things happening in the SWPL. We will obviously keep an eye on that. And we'll be premiering our Scottish Women's Football Show, which will air for the start of the SWPL season, which I think is going to be the middle of August. So we'll be having a weekly show on the SWPL, so we're following our women's football coverage this year. Let's move on to the Lowland League. Obviously, the Lowland League been in the press for bad reasons the past few months, and probably it's hard to disagree with why, but big movements happening at the likes of Broomhill, who are obviously in that historic partnership with Open Goal, the media company. They have made some big signings. They are looking to obviously go up the leagues and have a really good start. 3 signings that catch my eye from there is Ryan Conroy and Gary Fraser, obviously joining Simon Ferry, who is taking the job as manager and knows them from Peterhead, and good experience for him. So, yes, I think Ryan Conroy and Gary Fraser will be 2 good signings for them. Broke Watson from Stranraer is a player I've been a fan of for a while. I think he's a really talented youngster. He will do really well in that league. He's a good talent, Broke Watson. lot of other signings have made as well. Jack Ruddy, who was at Darvel for a while, was goalkeeper. I think he was at East Kilbride as well. He's a talented player. I think he's a good signing for them. And East Kilbride have obviously made some big moves as well. They are another team who have kind of been hanging about the Lowland League maybe longer than they thought. They have brought in Kevin Rutkowitz, who's obviously been on the show. And the big signing they've made is Bob McHugh from Queen's Park, who obviously was instrumental in Queen's Park going up. He will do really well in that league as well. I think the Lowland League could be very exciting this year. I think we've got two teams, Broomhill and East Kilbride, who are probably going to be neck and neck. I think both sides will be impressive. You've got obviously the youth teams, Celtic, Rangers and Hearts, who are going to obviously can't get promoted, but they'll obviously be thereabouts the top league. You've got like Kevin Beath coming down as well. Gretna, I wouldn't sleep in Gretna, doing really well this season. I think they've managed to get a bit more of a structure in the club. I think it's took a while, but I think they're bringing in some good young players. We've got a good young manager as well, so they could be one to keep an eye on as well. But the Lowland League, we'll obviously be keeping up to date with the Lowland League as much as possible this season. And let's move on to the West. We are obviously going to be doing a weekly West of Scotland football show. Let's start with some of the deals catching our eye in the Premier Division. Darvel, obviously the champions last season, failed to reach promotion to the Lowland League, but they've wasted no time in trying to get there again this season. They've strengthened their defence big time. Ross Meakin, who's obviously at Forfar last season, had a brilliant season for them. He's joined Darvel as well. Chris McGowan from Kilwinning, which wasn't a secret. That was known for a while that was probably going to happen. But yeah, he's another one who could be an ideal signing for them. And Craig Truesdale, who joined from Rob Roy, they've got some business done early, Darvel. So I wouldn't suspect that would be the end of their business. I think they'll bring a couple more in. The good thing Darvel have done as well, obviously they've kept the players that they obviously they've stayed on, like Ian McShane, Darryl Meggett, Scott Ferguson, players who maybe a lot of people maybe thought could be moving on after the failure to get promoted, but they've chose to stay on. It's going to be, I think Darvel will just get stronger this season. I think Darvel will be near enough at top again in what's looking like an unbelievably talented league. I think there's a load of really good teams in that Premier Division next season, and Darvel will obviously be looking to defend their title and go one better and gain promotion next season. One team in the Premier Division who are going to be doing a load of business, and I know this for a fact, are Kilwinning Rangers. They have obviously, David Gormley's the new man at the helm there. They have made some great starts to their transfer front. Dylan Mackin, who's obviously brilliant at Stirling, has joined there. Brilliant experience in bringing in Chris Miller, who's obviously a Scottish Cup winner with St Johnstone, had a good time with East Kilbride as well. Morton, legend. Bringing him in is brilliant. That's a brilliant signing. I think that's probably one of the most impressive signings of the summer in the West. And just today they've announced they're signing Craig Gordon from Rossvale, the goalkeeper. Do not sleep on him he was a really talented goalkeeper last season. A lot of winning points for Rossvale. Obviously they weren't able to stay up, but Craig Gordon made sure they were surviving longer than they probably were expected to. Craig Gordon is a talented goalkeeper, so I think that's a good bit of business as well. And I don't suspect that will be the end of the Buffs transfer business. One thing I will say, go on to Kilwinning's Twitter page and you'll see some of the best transfer reviews from Ben Grant, who's done really well with that. Brilliant job on the transfer reviews that he's been putting out. Avon Meadow have also made some good business as well. They have, what I think they've done really well is they've kept some of their good players, and they've brought in a couple of players as well who might have been unlucky not to stay up, like Kieran Bebeki from Cumbernauld, who've been really talented for them last season. He's joined Avon Meadow. Ross Urquhart as well from Rossvale, who's a really talented midfielder. He's joined at Meadow Park for the season. David Ramsey from the Buffs as well. So there's three really impressive signings. Reece Wallace, another one from Bonneton, who I think was very underrated last season, so keep an eye on him. He's joined Avon Meadow as well. We'll move on to the First Division, where two big clubs, I think two clubs have made some unbelievable business this season. St Cadoc's have obviously, they finished second behind Cambuslang in Conference B. They've brought in some good signings as well. They went to Petershill and brought in Ronan Sweeney, who had a great season, really impressive goal scoring record last year, and CD as well at Petershill. So they've raided Petershill for those two. And Cumnock, they brought in three players from Cumnock: Kieran Hughes, Smart Oslerlower. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Sorry if I've forgot that. I think Kieran McLaughlin as well. I think is that how you pronounce it? Sorry if that's your wrong name, but I'm sure it's McLaughlin that's joined St Cadoc's. But the big one for St Cadoc's, in my opinion, is bringing Chris Erskine in. that is a very, very exciting signing for them. Obviously, Chris Erskine's track record with the United, Partick Thistle, he's done really well. East Kilbride last season as well, he'd done really well there as well. He could be the difference for them going up and staying down. Drumchapel, obviously, as well, they're looking to get up, and they brought in like Jay McInally from Maryhill, who had a really good goal scoring record last year. The one signing though that caught everybody's eye was the signing of former Rangers and Hearts winner David Templeton, who'd obviously been in retirement, but has came out of it to play for Drumchapel, so that was a good bit of business for them. West of Scotland transfers will be up to date as much as possible. There's a lot happening, so we'll be keeping you up to date. And we're going to wrap up the first show there. That is the transfer show for this week. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Let me know how you thought about it in the comments below. This is obviously the first podcast I've done in a while, so apologies if I was a bit rusty and just blabbering on, which I began to suspect I was, but we will be getting back into the swing of things. Obviously, it's been a pretty rough time, I will say. I'll be kind of getting more into the hang of getting back into the podcast in front and things like that. But stay tuned for more transfer news coming up over the next few weeks, and we'll be doing this show hopefully as soon as we'll be back hopefully next week with more of the transfer show. Thanks very much for listening, everyone. Please take care. Thank you.